You know, Lawrence, doing these things a little bit improvised like this, I feel a bit vulnerable.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sweaty.
I want to encourage. I want to acknowledge your courage to be vulnerable in public like this in front of your beloved. No, I don't think that opening is what ended the relationship. I think that the relationship had incompatibility in it, and if opening did anything, it just accelerated the exposure of the truth of that. For me, life boils down to two primary things, and it's growth and pleasure.
Yo, sit down, let's dig into your spiritual ego. Think you're looking fly, white linen kimono, got your yoni egg in. I think you're ready. Yeah, it's time for Ubud on tea.
Hey Barry.
What's up, guys?
Great. Whoa. We're meant to record Ubud on tea. Starting in like a minute.
Right now. I think the cameras are already rolling.
Well, you're definitely going to want to start Ubud on tea with some very special tea. And that's what I have for you today. This is a very special oolong. It's called Aged Oriental Beauty. And the name of this tea is actually True Love. Because it's so warming and heart-opening, this tea. But it's actually from 1990. It's a traditionally processed oolong, so very high oxidation, and it's just really an incredible tea.
Is this going to put us really in our heart for the episode?
Yes, it should put you into your heart space, be able to just drop in, feel fuzzy and warm all inside, and just share that feeling with everybody today.
Yeah.
You know, Lawrence, doing these things a little bit improvised like this, I feel a bit vulnerable.
Do you?
Because I feel. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
Well, it's like we don't know what happens, and it's like kind of a little bit exposing sometimes. How do you relate to that?
Well, first of all, I want to say that it's good to be back. Right? Vulnerability is something that I feel is like comes easier to me. Although that's the thing about vulnerability is it's a deepening. So when we do experience it as vulnerable, it's something that it's like a new layer. It's something that happens that we haven't been there before.
Yeah.
It's a new depth.
Do you share like very vulnerable things on your Instagram? Like last time I was thinking, I'm pretty open. I like to be open about where I'm at, the things I share, but there's definitely things that like keep privacy, even when I think, I know with my romantic partner, for example, the things I don't want to share publicly, right? Like, like when do you, because you're active on Instagram and sometimes you're quite vulnerable, like how do you play with that?
I actually will share with you what is vulnerable for me on Instagram, because I don't know how much the viewers know, but I used to live in Russia, and when I lived in Russia, I used my Instagram and shared everything. Like I was like super vulnerable, but it's almost because of the cultural like divide, because I didn't feel like I was necessarily Russian. I felt like I could say anything and I didn't care if I was being judged. But I do feel when I share in English that it's my edge. I do it still, but it's a different kind of vulnerable. Yeah, like I'm a little bit more aware of like the possibility of being criticized. I think with this show also, like because the hopes are that we have lots of exposure. Yeah. So like the idea of like some trolls or even like maybe like a certain Instagram page might want to talk about us, right? So it's something that I'm a little bit more aware of now. How about you? Like, you don't use Instagram that often?
Not so much. I'm more vulnerable on my Telegram. I feel it's more of a safe space.
I love your Telegram.
Because it's less open. But at the same time, I find it beautiful. It's just an interesting balance to have also for me. I don't really know. Personally, I don't think there's much, but I don't want to involve people who don't want to. It's like it's consent, so it can be friends, it can be projects that want to be a little bit more low key. But yeah, to me it's been just something I was thinking about, because I feel for a time putting things on Instagram and saying, okay, now I eat fruits, or now I take ice baths, or even things that would be more deep, or things like this. It's like just created a pressure that pushed me to be who I want to be. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I'm friends with you for a long time, so that's the thing that really struck me about you, is the way that you are so open, and there is in like this really sweet way, I don't give a fuck about anything.
Yeah.
And that's what I really appreciate in you. I mean, amongst other things.
Yeah, we're talking about, like, for example, if Ubud on Acid were to take clips and show things, that's a discussion we might have in the other one, but I think we're pretty fine with it on a personal level. I think that might be dangerous to say right now, but I don't think there's any part where I'd be like, okay, that'd be terrible, I think I would own anything.
So I'll share, I think I might have archived something on Instagram, because most of my Instagram's in Russian, like the stuff that was really vulnerable. So I was like, whatever, Ubud on Acid, they can't really find anything. But there was one clip on Yepi. I was at Lion's house, and it was raining, and I danced in my underwear like I was at ecstatic dance. And I was like because Ubud on Acid, they screenshotted us for like a few hours, and they said that they were going to go deep into us, and then they just erased that, and they didn't speak about us. So like, obviously we're not that interesting to them, at least
I think they know you're too keen.
Yeah, they know that I'm like, come on guys, well, look, whatever they do is really, other than for our buddy Jeff, who got thrown off the island, Jesus on the top of the tour.
I've seen that.
Other than him, I think everybody else has like reaped the rewards of getting extra attention from them.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we'll talk about it. This is a future episode. But back to being open. Also, there's something about there's social media, and then there's also like, we'll talk about it. So Josh, I guess today, we'll bring him in soon. But actually, that's a conversation I've had with him quite a bit. So we did a retreat together about a year ago. It was called the Dojo, and with my friends James and we had chats around it, and that was very interesting. He was kind of telling me and kind of teaching me about the possibility of healing while being seen. Well, my default, I feel, as a projector, as a man, is when I feel turbulences, like I'm very sad or I'm angry, my default is more, okay, I'll go to my room, meditate, or emote, or do something more by myself. I don't want to burden people. And then I go back into the public in my better face, let's say, in my better way. And actually, I found it very beautiful, and we'll talk about it when he comes. But he inspired me to maybe show more when I'm not at my best.
We talked about that with Barry earlier, off camera.
Yeah.
Where we talked about how, as men, there is this ability to go home, go away from everything, integrate it, and come back. So I do think that it's really interesting, because what you're speaking to is something that I tend to move towards. Like, I need to express myself. And I find that expressing myself
in front of people and be seen.
Well, by being seen, it changes, like, energetics start to shift. Like the puzzle pieces change, where like if you do it at home, it's like rehearsal, nobody sees it. Which is nice, because you're moving your own energy, but there's something about moving the energy in the matrix.
Which is a bit what we do sometimes at yoga band, at ecstatic dance, for example. Someone will have a bit of a cathartic event, and they allow to do that in public, which is probably a good in-between between opening and maybe you don't want it on Instagram. Maybe you do, maybe you don't.
Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I mean, man, I've like living here and living this like new Ubudian Balinese life. I've definitely shifted. Like, I actually had somebody write me the other day on Instagram and say, "How come you're not sharing heartfelt stuff? You're only showing like commercials or whatever, like promotions for my yoga events and stuff now." And I'm like, just where I'm at in my life. But I do remember like feeling like the way that we feel about like we only eat the cleanest food, and there's like a little bit of a superiority, like we only eat fruit. I remember thinking of myself as like the person who was the most authentic on Instagram once upon a time, and thinking of myself like also having this like ego inflation around that too.
The vulnerability Olympics.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like
my friend Rick, he calls it like this: who's gonna be the most vulnerable and is gonna put the deepest share.
That's what I want to talk to Josh about, the vulnerability Olympics.
Should we get him in?
Yeah, I think it's time. He looks ready. He looks warmed up.
Give me 5.
He looks like he wants a cup of tea.
I'm going to hold this and slurp with you. I'm going to wait. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you.
Josh has been on our show before, actually.
Yeah,
I was on the premiere.
Yeah, you were on the first episode.
It was good fun.
And you said you were going to bring a mic with you.
I did, but you've got 3 mics now, so we're good.
So apparently you did well because we invited you again.
Yes.
For a full episode.
I like to think of that as external validation. For sure. So
Can you please pour him a cup?
I would love some tea. That's why I've come actually, is for the tea.
Guests are so demanding in these days.
And co-hosts.
What are we drinking?
Barry explained it already.
It's a new
It's
one.
called True Love.
True Love.
Yeah, Oriental Beauty.
Oriental Beauty, True Love.
It's going to open our hearts for vulnerable conversations.
Okay.
Because that's one thing with many other things that I love about you. But before we get there, we have the fire questions, bro.
Oh, okay, cool.
Do we do it now?
Yeah, let's
That's
do
what
it
we
now.
decided.
Let's do it now.
Yeah.
I'm just going to drink this tea while you...
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to also drink the tea.
Keep the ceremonial space for 30 seconds.
I feel so much more authentic.
And grounded.
And grounded.
I just want to say this as I prepare the questions. This is a shameless advertising plug for Last Tribe, which is the store at Zest. And the only reason I'm talking about the clothes that I'm wearing right now is because you're one of the best dressed men I know. Like I see you and you're like, you got a good vibe. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
This is from Last Vibe at the Zest store. Okay, so we have this new segment. It's called This or That. I'm gonna give you a few moments to answer which you prefer, and if you want, you can throw in like a short sentence about why. Okay?
Cool.
Okay. So the question goes like this: Canggu or Uluwatu?
Canggu.
Why?
It's a very good question. I actually prefer Uluwatu, but I'm really happy in Canggu right now.
Okay, cool.
Zest or Sayuri?
Sayuri's. Sorry, Pierre.
I told you this was a dangerous one.
Let's not ask why.
Yeah. Colonic or Cambo?
Cool, that's a tough one. I'd say Cambo. Yeah. Colonic for like comfortability, but I feel somehow Cambo is more worthwhile of my time, in a sense.
Have you tried both at the same time?
Not strictly speaking.
Don't. Rapé or ice bath?
Yeah, very different things. I'd say ice bath, consistently.
Temple night or Kundalini class?
Temple night. That's an easy one.
Ayahuasca or Vipassana?
Vipassana.
And he just became like very Goenka about it. Cacao or pu'er?
Again, very different. How I'm feeling right now is pu'er, because I'm drinking tea.
You can take the next one, Lawrence.
I think I know the answer that he'll... I love it.
I might surprise you.
I don't think with this one, but you might. It would be a surprise. Durian or urine therapy?
Oh yeah. No surprises there. Definitely durian.
Yoga barn or radiantly alive?
Yoga barn? Sorry?
Sorry, babe. Malaika or Toltec?
I love you, Malaika. Toltec.
Kirtan or ecstatic dance?
Oh, that's a really tough one, actually. Because they're both equally important to me. So if I had to choose one and I could only do one for the rest of my life, I would probably choose dance. Because there's other forms of singing that I enjoy as well.
Even though you have a kirtan band now.
I do, which is great. It's been heaps of fun. I actually performed like one of my own written songs for the first time in front of like 60 people and had everyone singing it back to me. It was a really beautiful moment. It's really nice. But yeah, dance, like in terms of all the different forms of dance, ecstatic is my favorite. Just because it's free form and there's just so much movement for expression. I really love it. And kirtan's beautiful.
This game isn't over yet. We have more questions. Contact dance or ecstatic dance?
Ecstatic dance.
One more question. Stay at home on a Friday night or ecstatic dance?
I'd probably stay at home, to be honest. Friday night used to be my church, but nowadays not so much. I prefer Sunday.
That was the first ever. So you were on the first ever show, and you were also the first ever this or that.
Yay!
And then we're gonna have like music and like do 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 do. Oh.
That's great. Do I get a score? Like, do I pass or it's like A or B is 1.2 point? I'm amazing.
Yeah, A+.
More external validation. Bring it on.
We're in Ubud, and I feel a lot of people here have, let's say, challenged the vision in the Western world of having one wife, being married, and being in a monogamous relationship. And I know you've explored and got interested in open relationships. I don't know how much you're open to talk about specifically things, and you can share a bit about that, but I'm someone who's very curious also and who's interested in people who have different ways to relate. And so it was interesting, you talked about the difference between friendship and romantic relationships. And another difference, at least when you're monogamous, is, for example, if Lawrence is my friend, I'm not thinking, oh, if Josh spends also a lot of time with Lawrence, it's weird or it's not good. But somehow with romantic relationship, a lot of us do that. And so from that very rational mind, I was thinking, well, probably it works better, open relationship, because then if, I don't know, if I only want to spend one night with my partner and she wants to spend 5 nights a week with a man, then I can have another brother that takes care of her during the rest of the week. So on paper, it looks pretty good. But then, obviously, when you put the emotions into it and a lot of that, I found out yeah, it's not that simple. So I haven't done much.
You should have the Steph cam right now. The Steffi cam right now.
Sorry to interrupt. There's my partner watching. And we're in a monogamous relationship. And she's like, where is he going?
Anyways, sorry to interrupt.
Sweaty.
I want to encourage, I want to acknowledge your courage to be vulnerable in public like this in front of your beloved.
Where were we?
Yeah.
So that's a great preamble.
I'm interested. I haven't really experienced into that. I've only read a couple of books on it, but I guess quite different. And I know you've been into the fire of open relationship. And I'm just interested in you sharing about it.
Do you have a specific? It's a huge topic. Do you have a specific question?
I have one, but it's a little bit personal. Okay, which was actually the question of my partner, Steffi, when we talked about you in the bedroom.
I just want to say,
like the nose moment there.
I'm really, really glad that you guys are talking about me in the bedroom.
That's how she gets me hard. Joking.
Okay, so you can ask the question. I may or may not answer.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about having? I just remember I didn't ask. You were before the podcast, asked Steffi for permission if we can film her, and now she has a camera in her face. Anyway, do you feel having done? So you've had an open relationship for a long time with an ex-partner. And do you feel having opened that relationship, and well, first you can define what's open, because it can be sexuality, it can be love, but do you feel you've kind of shot the relationship in the foot in a way by opening that it encouraged the fact that you're not together anymore?
No, I don't think that opening is what ended the relationship. I think that the relationship had incompatibility in it, and if opening did anything, it just accelerated the exposure of the truth of that, essentially. So rather than wasting lots of time in a relationship that was not good, I got to waste just a little bit of time, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I think that, yeah, for me personally, in that relationship, the open experience of that, her connection with others, was never an issue. And I think that I think when it comes to anything non-monogamous, it comes down to your sense-making mechanisms. It's how you make sense of the world. Like, you're talking about the difference between friendship and partnership. If you're in partnership and we're hanging out together, then it's weird. But if you're in friendship, we're hanging out together, it's not weird. It's a sense-making mechanism, right? So I think it's really important to really honor the emotional impact of our sense-making mechanisms and not try and force them or change them in a way that is mechanical, or in a way that is you're trying to get to a particular outcome, and so you're running roughshod over your emotions, but rather treating it as an experiment, right? And using it as a way, because relationships are a vehicle for growth and pleasure. And there's lots of different things underneath that, but using it as a way, acknowledging it as a journey, and that with each thing that comes up, it being sufficient in and of itself, right? Rather than being like, this is an obstacle I have to overcome in order to get to destination XYZ. Being like, well, this is the direction that I'm moving in, and here's the next thing. Look at this exciting opportunity for deepening in love, for growth, for removing obstacles to pleasure in myself, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, in my past relationship, the experience of her connections with others was never an issue, because to me what was important was the quality and nature of our connection. And what I've come to since then is that for me, and again this is for me, that what's most important in my relationship is that my partner is engaging in things that fill her up, that excite her, that make her more alive, that if she comes back to me after doing whatever she's doing, she's coming back to me as more of herself. And now that could be work, right? Or it could be connections with other people, or it could be friendships, or it could be, whatever it might be, is that this is the determining factor. And there is, for me, a great sense of personal freedom in that. And for me, from that spaciousness that's created, I find that I'm able to love so much more in a way that feels really good for me. But I also recognize that, and again, this is really important, we all have different sense-making mechanisms, right? And I can't stress it enough how important it is to really honor the impact of those. So if we have an experience that brings up pain in us, to not just dismiss it because it doesn't fit with an ideology or some kind of destination that we're trying to move towards, but actually turn and be present with it, face it fully. Because it's an opportunity. And I'll go on a bit of a segue on this, and then we can come back to your line of questioning. But one of the models that I have for life is that, I mentioned earlier, we all carry pain, right? We all experience trauma, and that creates pain in our system, in our bodies, physical body, emotional body, whatever. And more often than not, at the time that happened, we don't have the resources to be able to deal with it properly. And so it remains in our system. And what we do in order to be able to continue with our life in a normal fashion is that we build a structure around that pain so that it's contained, essentially. And that allows the vehicle of us to continue to move in a functional way. Now, when we experience someone hurting us or some kind of external source of pain, my sense-making mechanism and something that I teach is that what's actually happening here is that someone is threatening the integrity of the structure that you've built around the pain that already exists. So the pain that you're feeling is because you're being given access to that pain, right? And what's normal in normal culture, especially in super normal culture, but even in conscious community, is to look at that and be like, well, that person's hurting me, right? And that's okay. It's okay to look at it that way. And I think sometimes really important, because another danger is to bypass that and run roughshod over your own emotions and really not honor the experience that you're having because of some ideology. But it doesn't make the ideology any less true. It's that actually what's happening is you're being given access to this pain that you're carrying, and it presents an opportunity to feel it now with the tools and the resources that you have to be able to hold yourself, to be able to show yourself in connection. And with this sense-making mechanism, what becomes possible is that you can actually feel that pain in connection with the person that hurt you, because how you're making sense of it isn't that they hurt you, is that they gave you access to it. And obviously it is heavily dependent on the other person's capacity to remain in connection as well, because otherwise it doesn't work. But yeah, anyway, there's more to speak on that, but I'll stop there for now.
I'm really moved by the access to pain. It's similar to like the way that I look at just various experiences in the body. Like if you're working out and you're staying in a position and the fire starts to burn within, it's like, okay, there's energy. There's access to that energy, as opposed to, fuck, when is it going to end already? It's like, whoa, like I can gather this and I can move it, and like different practices look at that. I wanted to segue to a question of, was there a shift, like in terms of the way that the meaning-making machine of Josh versus, like when I think of an open relationship, I can look at it from an intellectual point of view of, yes, just like Alex said, like it makes sense, right? Like how great would it be to be able to share my woman and like see her blossom and shine? It makes me so happy. But in my head, like when I think of open relationship, like I start thinking with my cock, and it starts to be like an internal porn movie, or an internal soap opera of like, that's my woman. Like I have ownership over that. So there's different layers. Now, by talking about it, they're starting to expand and what have you. But my question is to you, it's like, were you always like this? Or was it this process that expanded you into this kind of this way of looking at things? And
definitely a process of life. We're all raised in a culture that has a very specific prescription for love and relationships, and we are inundated by it forever, our entire lives, from every direction. Like fairy tale movies being obviously the most prevalent example, but it's literally everywhere, and that's because it's something that is socially and culturally accepted to be true. Like anything, if you look at anything, right? Mm-hmm. Anything that is socially and culturally accepted to be true permeates what I see as the cultural mythos of humanity. And every different region has a slightly different cultural mythos, which is actually a really great access point into this intellectually. It's like, in this country it's normal to wear hijab, and in this country it's normal to go to the beach with a bikini, and we're so entrenched in our idea of what's normal that we see the other person as completely insane, right? And so if that's possible in one place, obviously it's possible in every place, because it's all ideology. I feel like I've lost track of the question. Can you?
Well, the question was, like, at what point did you become the person that your context for life is, oh, I want my woman to be more fully herself no matter what it takes? When did that become the norm for you? Like, was there a process? Was there a shift? Was there a moment? You said that there was a process.
It's
right?
It's definitely been a process. So the reason I was talking about the cultural mythos is because when I was growing up, so what I've always known is that devotion is really important to me, and connection. I know that I want to spend the rest of my life with someone, and build from there, build tribe, build community. And that feels really important to me. It doesn't feel important to everyone, but it feels important to me. And in the culture that I was brought up in, the prescription for that was monogamous relationship. In order to have this, then you have to do this, right? And so for my whole life, I was a serial monogamist, deeply monogamous, because this is what's important to me, this sense of devotion, this sense of commitment. And it didn't occur to me that it could be possible in some other way. And it was, absolutely my lived experience of opening to this possibility, like witnessing the woman that I was so devoted to, that was my family, that I was going to spend the rest of my life with, we were going to have kids, witnessing her feel attraction to someone else and be excited about that and be present to what that brought alive in me. And on one hand, there was fear, but because again, my sense-making kind of mechanism around fear is like lean into it, because otherwise it controls you from the shadows. So that really helped me to like begin the journey. But then there was also this other part of me that was like, oh wow, look how excited she is, that's so beautiful. You know, and then like a bunch of different things in between. And so just kind of making space in my system at the beginning of this journey to allow and accept all of it, you know, is to welcome all of it. And then, you know, predominantly it's been about, I've just been really curious about how other people who are either for or against the concepts make sense of it. And in most of my conversations, I sit down and I'm curious and I dig in and I'm like, well, what do you think? Why do you think that? Where does that come from? Where does that lead? And just over time, beginning to build a tapestry that works, that feels like it resonates for me, based on what's important to me. And, you know, like growing up, I would have looked at what's important to me and been like, well, that's impossible, right? You have to sacrifice. You have to choose one or the other. You know, it's either devotion or, you know, this expression of freedom. And I don't remember the point where I was like, well, does it have to be one or the other? Can it be both? But I remember this revelation coming to me. I don't know exactly when or what happened, but it was like, what if it could be both? What if it's just my position that is causing me to see it as an either or choice? Like I have to sacrifice this or that. Because, and this is an analogy that I often use when it comes to how we see things. Like for example, right now it's daytime, right? We look up at the sky, the sun's in the sky, we can say it's definitively daytime right now. But is simply a matter of position. It's because we're on this particular point in Earth that it's daytime. But if we were to zoom out from Earth and go out far enough away, we would see that it's actually 50% daytime and 50% nighttime, and it's always 50% day and 50% night. And that never changes. And for me, this provides a really interesting kind of like intellectual framework to be able to look at how can I expand myself and my perceptual awareness enough so that I can make room for both day and night at the same time.
I wanted to, as Alex takes a look at where we're going to go with this, I just wanted to speak to, I get a sense as like being the host, there's a part of me that's making sure that we're navigating it for the viewers. And we're talking about it for the most part like it's the norm. I feel like the conversation. We're asking questions about it, but maybe it's because we're in Ubud, maybe because it's a conversation. But I feel like there's going to be people that are watching that are like, how do you introduce it? How do you even like have that frame of like sense making? Because I think the desire is freedom for sure, but how does somebody go there? And I guess the other question that I'll ask you, is it worth it? Has it been worth it for you?
Yes and no. Past me would have said absolutely not. because I lost things that I felt were really important to me. But present me realized that actually I was making those things important to me out of a sense of fear, of being out of connection, of being abandoned, of being alone. It's a slippery slope. A lot of people are curious about this, and their surface level motivations, the ones that they're conscious of, are, for lack of a better word, immature. They're half-baked. They're not fully in alignment. And I think the reason for this is suppression. Is when you suppress an energy, it comes out sideways. And you see this culturally all over the world, like things like fetishes come most predominantly in cultures where sexuality is suppressed. And it's because the energy is there, it's alive, it's present, it wants to move. So when you're coming from a space of, just kind of uncovering this, the culture has suppressed this concept. And the tendency can be immature. It can be to move in a way that the energy comes out sideways. And it can be really damaging and really painful. And it can, like you can think with your cock or your pussy. And make
You mean
mistakes.
with your lingam or your yoni? We're in Ubud.
Sorry, I thought we were talking to the rest of the audience.
They're also
Yeah.
in Ubud.
Yeah, cock and balls.
Fair point.
So yeah, I think, again, it really just comes down to trusting yourself, and be open to things changing throughout your life. Like, you may be really interested and curious to explore this now, and then you may find that you're not. Or you may be really close to exploring this now, and then later on you may find that you are. And you may oscillate, you may swing. And the most important thing is that you trust your own sense, and that you honor your own experience, and that you're in alignment with your own values. Like, for me, a really important value is being in connection. So it's really important to me to make sure that I'm honoring the people that I'm in connection with, whether they're friends or family or a lover or whatever it might be, and to do my best to do that. So yeah, it's really important to be authentic and be vulnerable. The moment that you decide that you think you know something, you're attached to an ideology, and you run the risk of causing damage. But rather just stay open, stay vulnerable, continue to share your experience, continue to honor your own emotional experience, continue to honor the other's emotional experience, and trust. And it might just be the conversation is what you need, not the experience. For me, life boils down to two primary things, and it's growth and pleasure. And there's lots of things that go underneath each, but we need both. And whenever I'm looking at an experience in life, I'm looking at how is it ticking both boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason this is important is because if we focus too much on growth, we end up in constant process. We end up dry.
When people tell me they're looking for growth in the relationship, I'm like, well, be careful with your intention.
No,
It can be rough.
Growth is great, but you have to balance it with pleasure. Growth is really important. If you focus only on growth, then it's really rough. You're constantly in process. You're arguing. Things become dry. You get to a point where it's like, this is not good for me, and you break and run and start the cycle again. But if you focus solely on pleasure, then you end up kind of like chasing peak experiences and not feeling fulfilled, right? Because the soul's desire is growth. So we need to have both. And yeah, there's lots of different ways that you can incorporate both, and they're all great.
And I think people's perception of open relationship would be that it's very growth driven. And what I find
Depends who you talk to.
Exactly. What I find beautiful with you, if I can share, is that you told me you could see at a temple night, for example, your partner making love with another man and finding it beautiful and finding pleasure in that, which is not every man on this earth right now, right? But so to most people, open relationship would feel like it's such a stretch in growth where I could feel for you now and where you're at. It's not so much that because you don't have the constant trigger most people would have if they were to do it.
For sure. But I would like to take a step back and just say that this isn't just about like open relating.
Mm-hmm.
Growth and pleasure applies to all forms of relationship, right? And that they're all equally valid and all equally powerful. And it's really, it's up to you in terms of where your edge is and how you relate to that edge, whether or not it's something that you want to lean into and break free from, or if it's something that you want to move in an entirely different direction and not have to touch it. Both are equally valid, and both will lead to an experience of life, again, if you have the right sense-making mechanisms in place of growth and pleasure. You know, you'll get to the end of your life more or less satisfied and fulfilled, whichever path you take. One's not better than the other. But for me, I didn't like the idea of the fear that I felt in my system around this, because I had traumatic experiences as a kid around women cheating on me and things that happened in relationships that left me feeling really a lot of pain. And so I was kind of carrying this pain, and I was like, I don't want to carry this pain anymore. How do I not carry this pain as I face the thing that I'm afraid of? When I face it so fully that it no longer scares me. And in doing so, I found, you know, a great deal of growth and capacity for pleasure and love.
I have to go to the bathroom.
Wait.
I mean, we should speak to what just happened.
Yeah. We had
There
a
was a-
bathroom break.
We had a bathroom break and there was an earthquake, like a real life
proper
earthquake.
It's like a bathroom quake.
Yeah, that has everything to do with open relationships.
It was totally connected. Oh my God, what a synchronicity.
Whoa.
That was a big one. But today, what's today? We're recording August 22,
Yeah.
4:35. We can look at how it was, because depending if the epicenter was here, it's not such a big one. But if the epicenter was far,
Then it was
that
huge.
was felt. Yeah.
It was definitely the earth shaked.
Actually, my camera kept running, so we can.
Oh, that is
keep
true.
A little bit of that.
Yeah, that's cool. We'll have a little bit of that. Cool.
So before we get started,
Shake it off.
I would love some more tea.
Yay, me too, actually. Now that I'm like,
Yeah.
the tank is empty, I'm ready to fill her up again.
Hey, took your cup back from the bathroom.
Yeah.
I feel like I missed an inside joke.
But yeah, it's nice that we actually have
Coming
some.
Anyway, yeah, so nice cup of tea, little earthquake, and look, we were saying that's first, we're so happy that you're so open. It's such an interesting conversation, right? And we'll also keep these ones more around an hour, so we'll have a bit of a last an ending to it. And we're thinking, because we've been going really deep, and that's what I love about you, Josh, is that you can go deep into those emotions, into that heart openness, but you're also really full spectrum. And so we've done a lot of comedy together, improv comedy, and that's interesting. How you can be full spectrum, going into your sadness, your hurting, and at the same time keep that light tone and have a lot of fun. Actually, I'm interested for you, like, how do you combine comedy with being so much in the depths of your heart, where people can see them as not compatible, maybe?
Fair question. I guess they're kind of like different rooms in a house. It's like you can be in the kitchen and then you can be in the sunroom, you know, and they're for different purposes and you have different experiences in them and they're great.
Like, what's a sunroom?
It's a great question. We don't have time for that today.
Yeah.
I love comedy, and again, it comes back to this idea of the balance between growth and pleasure. And I think the growth and pleasure is in every area of life. Like, comedy is an incredible avenue for growth, leaning into your edge. Like, if you've never done comedy improv before, the idea of getting up on stage in front of people and trying to be funny is pretty terrifying for most. And so that can be like a massive growth edge. And leaning into that growth edge leads to pleasure because it's fucking hilarious and it's a lot of fun. So what I love about comedy improv is the principles behind it. So there's 7 principles that I kind of espouse in comedy improv that make it just go better, make it flow more smoothly, make it easier for you to interact with other people and support each other in a scene. And why I love them so much is because they're life principles. They're things that if you incorporate into your life, you're going to have a better experience in life. And yeah, they're also super relatable to relationships. For example, one of the primary concepts in comedy improv is the idea of yes and it's the idea of accepting what's called an offer. If you're in a scene and someone says something, they're giving you an offer. They're creating some kind of context for the scene. And the principle is that you accept that offer. So if I come to you and I'm like, hey, taxi driver, yada, 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 you accept the fact that you're a taxi driver in that scene, and then you can build on it. And there's incredible benefit to this in relationship because it creates kind of like this upward trend of energy. And you're like, yes, I accept that as your truth, as your experience, and let's build on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, we call that, it's another one of the principles is building blocks. Like, that's what you're speaking to. As the momentum picks up, all of a sudden you have this energy flow of yes and, yes and, yes and, accepting offers.
Yeah, and even when it leads to something that's like out of alignment or a mistake, you know, that what you might deem as a mistake, it always leads to growth. It always leads to like a deeper understanding of yourself, of the other, of how to interact with each other.
And it can be the funniest moments too. I remember we almost did a comedy improv show together. In the end, Lawrence and I
bailed.
didn't bail. But part of it is I didn't have as much fun when we were doing the rehearsing as I had before.
For sure.
And part of it is it's really hard with comedy improv to, like, there are kind of rules that make it better. And also sometimes the fact that it doesn't go according to plan or that people make mistakes is the funniest. And that's why in the rehearsal it got a little bit too serious for me, and I missed having that like quirkiness.
It was too growth focused.
Yeah, and it's actually a really inspiration for this podcast. We talk about it sometimes with Lawrence. We're very inspired by comedy improv, and we want it to be a balance. We also sometimes want to like keep the weird thing, the quirkiness, the aliveness of the moment.
I actually had a different experience than you. Yeah. And that was, it was challenging, but I felt something that I never felt in comedy improv before. In those, like when we were doing that, I mean, leading up to the show, I felt like my brain was starting to get engaged in a way of, I'm getting this at a whole other level. So it was actually like a little heartbreaking for me not to continue that process, and not that I can't still, what have you, but that was something that I felt like it was like, oh, it was like a puzzle that I finally like got a piece. I hadn't figured it out, but I was like I felt that. What I'm just gonna keep going, and you can end the show when it's time. But what Alex and I spoke about when we were wanting to bring up and like planning for the show, wanting to bring up comedy, was the catharsis behind it. And I think that it goes really well with the growth and the pleasure. How would somebody, again, who has never been in an open relationship or has never done comedy improv, how would somebody utilize these aspects for catharsis? Or maybe how does it work for you? Is that even a thing?
It's a really good question.
And that's the end of the show.
Thanks for accepting the offer.
Yes, great question, and that's all we have time for. So yeah, I think. Sorry to just completely ignore your.
I'm that. It's his job. He's the structure guy. I can do this, and he knows. Anyhow,
this is a really great question, and I think it's best answered in a more broad context rather than specifically about a particular challenge that someone might be facing. Is that, again, one of the biggest fears we have is that we won't be accepted, right? Is that we'll be cut off or we'll be rejected, we'll be out of connection, love will be withdrawn. And this is the fear that you face when you're going up on stage in comedy improv, because you're improvising, right? It's not scripted. You don't get to put a particular face or a mask to the audience that's in front of you, because you don't have time to figure that out. You just have to allow whatever comes through to come through. And in doing that, it's like exercising a muscle of self-trust and exercising the muscle of allowing yourself to be seen in whatever comes through. And I think, like, on a broader level, this is the primary benefit. Like, I've seen, I saw this one scene between these two people, a man and a woman. It was a 4-person scene. It was down in Uluwatu when I was living down there. And these two had been in relationship, and the relationship had ended like relatively badly, and they were in strong judgment of each other. And they were brought into this scene where the two of them were acting out miming. They weren't talking, but they were acting out miming being in competition. The game was sports commentators. And there were 2 other people who had no idea who the two were or what their relationship was or any of their history, that were commentating on it. Yeah. And one of the things in comedy improv is deep listening. And so the 2 commentators were deeply listening to the dynamic that was happening between them, and were literally commentating a lot of the actual dynamic that was existing between them. And so they were in this game acting out this thing being commentated on. And it was incredibly cathartic for both of them. Bet. And they hadn't spoken since the separation until, and then they played that game together.
They both volunteered at the same time.
They both volunteered at the same time. I was MC, so I picked them. Because that's the kind of guy that I am.
You were amazing.
And yeah, after that game, they sat down and they had a chat, and it was like, it was really healing for them.
I bet.
Yeah. And so there's like, that's an extreme example, but there's, yeah, incredible power in being able to laugh at yourself, being able to not take yourself so seriously. And there's nothing wrong with taking yourself seriously. It's a very normal and natural thing to do in order to protect ourselves. And there's a massive value in being able to kind of let that go and laugh at ourselves, which is one of the reasons why I love Ubud on Acid. Because it's bringing that element into the community and allowing people to see themselves from all sorts of different angles and be able to kind of like relax and open and be more real, which I think is a really beneficial thing.
Yeah, yeah. I've always made that point about Ubud on Acid. It's the fact that I think that we could get away with a lot as long as we don't have feedback for it. And as soon as we have feedback, we have to like look in the mirror.
This is the primary purpose of the jester in the court of days of old, is that the jester was really the only person in the court that could be real with the leadership and do it through humor, through comedy, and not risk having his head chopped off, basically, for giving bad feedback. And so it was a critical element, and I think that, yeah, I think comedy plays that role, and we can incorporate comedy into our lives to be able to, you know, fulfill that function in our own lives.
It's so funny that you talk about it, because that's a topic we've prepared for the next guest, Kevin, who also loves this analogy and works with GPCs. And we look in the society today, who hasn't gotten censored on YouTube for talking about New World Order, vax stuff, all that. GPCs, right? It's comedy.
Yeah.
Comedy is the power to be able to cut through defenses and land. And that's what makes good comedy good, is that it speaks truth, but it does it in a way that we can laugh at it.
Yeah, you spoke to it by using the archetype, the jester, because like if you watch now, since the pandemic began, if you watch like the late night American talk show hosts, where, you know, the most popular ones like Jimmy Fallon, they're not doing that anymore. They're now like making jokes to get a yes for the narrative that's going on. So, I mean, you bringing that up, I think, is very acute to why it's valuable, why it's important. I do feel like we're gonna end now. Like it feels like the appropriate time. Do we want to do the questions for Instagram or right now?
Yeah, let's do now.
Okay, let's do them now. We can always clip them for Insta too. Okay, so we have a couple of questions that are like regular questions that we do, but we're like finding different formats for them. So, like
improvising,
I guess. The first question is, what did you experience for the first? What one thing did you experience in Ubud for the first time?
One thing?
Yeah, or one thing that stands out.
Well, one thing. All right. Yeah, I came to Ubud first when I came to Bali, and the primary thing that stood out for me was a sense that I got that there wasn't something wrong with me. And that was a really profound insight for me, because coming from where I'd come from, I would look around and be like, well, there's something wrong with me. Like, I'm having an issue with the way the world works. The problem must be within me. And then coming here, being amongst all of these people that...
Oh, they're real people, you're not weird anymore.
Yeah, well, these people were having the same sense, right? And they're all congregating here. And yeah, this has really stood out for me. It happened 9 years ago. But it was this sense of like, actually there's not something wrong with me, and all of the thoughts that I've had about what's, damaging or out of alignment or bad in society, I'm not the only one seeing this. And that was a really profound insight for me.
It's cool because that confidence and that insight also, I imagine, goes with you now to Canggu or to Uluwatu or wherever else you go in the world. You can't lose that now. It's part of you.
Yeah, I found the trust in it. It was always part of me. But to be able to stand in it with trust and confidence is something that is now with me, for sure.
Sweet. Ready for the next question?
Yes.
Are you ready for the next? Do you want to ask it or do you want me to ask it?
You go.
Okay.
You're so kind.
The next question is, what's not weird in Ubud that's weird everywhere else?
Just one thing? Yeah, so much. It's difficult for me to answer because I've been so enmeshed in this culture for so long that all of a sudden it now feels normal. Like I have these experiences of like, wow, people out there still think that, because I haven't been in contact with that for such a long time that I forget that the rest of the world is still the rest of the world. So to answer that question, I'd be like, what's normal? So I guess probably all sorts of things, like dancing just for expression, ecstatic dance. That's normal here and it's weird in the rest of the world. It doesn't fit. Talking about your emotions, normal here, weird in the rest of the world. You have a container for that. You go to your therapist. Yeah, I mean, so many things. So many things. It's very difficult to narrow down.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for, I feel like I've deepened my understanding and my connection to you. I really feel like how we started the show off today when you were like just being in connection with another human. I feel like that became really real today, and I really appreciate that. And so much so that me and Alex did not once mention to the listeners and the watchers to not forget to subscribe, do not forget to follow, do not forget to share.
Hit the like button.
Yeah, and the notification button. We didn't do it once in the whole episode because we were so ingrained in what was going on.
It's okay. I invite you to just have full self-acceptance around that experience. And if you don't subscribe, also accept yourselves. But subscribe.
Subscribe. Yeah.
Last slurp for you, Josh. That's
Please.
the tradition on the show. And look, we could have gone for 4 hours. We'll probably have you back. That was so interesting. We could have gone many ways, but I think that was so cool.
He's our first repeat guest.
Yeah.
Our first repeat guest.
I feel honored. Thank you. It's good to be here. It's good to dive deep into this one topic as well. That was fun.
Do you have anything you want to share, like how people can follow you? What's next for you, like, quickly?
Yeah, just Instagram, Josh V. Roberts.
Yeah.
Josh V. Roberts, I'm sure it'll be on the thing. So.
Slurp away.
Thank you. This is why I came. It wasn't slurpy enough.
It wasn't slurpy enough. It's okay. I mean, It's a yes and, you know?
I
Accept-
sloped
we
the last
accept.
one. You can probably just cut the audio over the top of that.
We were deep listening. It was fun.
I think we'll keep the little quirkiness of that, how we end this episode. That's
Mhm.
part of how it makes it relatable.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Or we
And,
can we can keep the other end. I said before. When I said
Oh,
this is
before
the
the
end.
earthquake.
No, when I said this is the end.
Oh,
Yeah.
You just cut the last bit of the whole thing.
Yeah.
bye, guys. It's over.